choice, right? You know, we have democracy. We get the choice to be whatever we want to be.
No doubt, but you don't have the choice to tell me what to call you. That's the problem. You see where that starts to get kind of dangerous. Anyone can be anything they want. I mean, I know plenty of transgender people, and I consider some of them friends.
So you rather think that rather than say, okay, I can be whatever gender I want, but you don't need to necessarily.
Of course, you have the freedom. I don't think a government agency should come through. You know what I do think is dangerous? Adding a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh box on a birth certificate, which is already happening in Canada. They're adding a non-binary box in Canada for gender. I think that's wrong. I think that's morally reprehensible.
What's up, YouTube? Hope you guys are feeling good. My name is Eliru, and today I'm back to the video and check out with you guys. This is called Real Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk tears apart pro-trans kid activist. You know how it goes, guys. We talk less and we react more. Let's check this out.
What's up?
Nice. So, the differences between a gender and a sex.
So
culturally speaking, in a lot of different historical societies, from Africa to the Pacific Islanders, there's long been held a distinction between what a gender is and what a sex is. With the sex being sexually, you either have a penis or a vagina, whereas gender-wise, there's been a lot of more fluidity there. Specifically with the Pacific Islander example, they've considered there to be up to like 4 or 5 different individual genders, not just man and woman, but also considered things like, now I can't remember the names that they had for them. But there was always that idea that gender was a social construct, whereas sex is a biological construct. So there have to be only 2 sexes, but there can be any number of genders because obviously it's a social construct. Whatever society agrees on would have to go. What do you think about that?
So just because civilizations have done it in the past doesn't make it a good idea. But recognizing that it did happen, we would make the argument that there's 2 sexes and 2 genders, and gender and sex are directly related.
Why would you say it's not a good idea to differentiate? It's because it seems to me that with all the people out there yelling that there should be more than one gender, it would make the most societal sense.
Well, I do believe there's more than one gender.
Yeah, of
course.
course.
No, I didn't mean trap you in words. I know.
Open for debate and dialogue.
But how many genders would you say there are?
Well, I myself don't really see a need to limit that idea. As if it is a social. So, for instance, continents, right? Continents are a social construct. The idea that there are 7 continents comes down to simply what lines have been drawn historically speaking. From my point of view,
I've never heard that one before, but that's
it's an interesting thing to look into historically speaking, because look at like Europe and Asia, for instance. The 2 of them look like they should be
right.
one
But
land.
here's the difference: is that there's not chromosomal structures within continents.
No, but that's sex.
No,
right?
but we would make the argument that sex and gender are directly related, and what makes the Western tradition unique and should be appreciated and defended is that gender and sex have always been directly related.
Except they haven't, Western speaking.
In the Western tradition, yes.
The ancient Greeks haven't. The ancient Greeks are where we get our Western tradition from originally.
Against it. The ancient Greeks were not part of the Western tradition, but I would say that some of our thinking and some of the inspiration of the founding came from Aristotelian or Socratic or Plato. Yeah, I would say that. But not everything the Greeks did,
not everything.
we adopted. But the Western tradition, so post-1800, gender and sex being directly related. This comes back to a question of identity. So the question is, can you choose to be something that you're not? You would say, no. I mean, you could choose. You have the freedom to be whatever you want to say, but you also don't have the power to force me to call you something else.
Getting lost a little bit in that point, because I think that's an interesting idea. That said, I know exactly where this is going to end up leading, but I'm going to ask the question
Sure.
anyway. If I were a police officer, right, and I wanted to become a lawyer, what's to stop me from doing that?
Nothing. You can go to school and become certified towards that.
So
But that's an identity based on merit. That's an identity based on choice.
Merit. I could be a really shitty lawyer.
Well, you have to pass the bar, don't you?
Yeah, but
So
a
that's
lot
merit.
of really shitty lawyers pass the bar.
Well, no doubt, but there is some form of achievement standard to become a lawyer, whether it should
But
be or
in
not.
America, the entire idea of choice, right? You know, we have democracy. We get the choice to be whatever we want to be.
No
That's
doubt,
always
but
been part of our
you don't have the choice to tell me what to call you. That's the problem. You see where that starts to get kind of dangerous. Anyone can be anything they want. I mean, I know plenty of transgender people, and I consider some of them friends.
So you rather think that rather than say, okay, I can be whatever gender I want, but you don't need to necessarily.
Of course, you have the freedom. I don't think a government agency should come through. You know what I do think is dangerous? Adding a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh box on a birth certificate, which is already happening in Canada. They're adding a non-binary box in Canada for gender. I think that's wrong. I think that's morally reprehensible.
Now, I would disagree on morally reprehensible, but I think that is an
Do you want me to tell you why I think it's morally reprehensible? Because children typically live in a state of confusion. Would you agree? They're trying to understand language. They're trying to understand their place in the world. Let me finish real quick. No, let me finish. So to add more confusion to a child's already discovery in a place in a very chaotic world, I consider to be morally questionable, if not reprehensible. It is society's, parents, and communities' right to try to guide a child to develop into a chaotic world. To say to a child, oh, you can choose whatever you want to be, that's adding more chaos into a child's life that will only lead to suffering.
I would add the caveat that I think children are pretty chaotic beings.
No, that's what I'm saying. So why add more chaos to a child's life? So in Canada, they have a third box right now, which is a non-binary box. So you can allow a child to choose whatever gender they want to be, which is fine later on as they start to mature.
Now, see, for me, the line that I would draw is, I see where you're coming from with that. And for me, the line would be more of a matter of, we talk about transgender, you talk about actually changing one's sex, actually going through the surgery.
Which, of course, everyone has, you have a right to do that.
See, actually, I would almost disagree with that more about the child thing. Because you see parents going out there and allowing their children doing that.
So let me give you an example. So in Oregon, without parental consent, at age 15, you can have the state pay for your sex realignment surgery.
Right.
Do you think there's something wrong with that?
Yes.
Okay, you do. Good. So we agree.
Oh, absolutely. So
Okay, then.
15, you're not even young enough to legally drink.
No, exactly.
You're not legally young enough to do anything.
You and I have agreement. I think there's something wrong when a 15-year-old can go get state-funded sex reassignment surgery without telling their parents.
I agree with that, but here's the thing. I think that's wrong. I don't necessarily think that if you're 15 years old and you want to identify as some other gender, like male, him, her, non-binary.
Yes, and it's incumbent on the individual to be respectful towards that person's dignity.
Yes,
but however, you must have, and you do it because you're being very respectful, as much understanding that I can say that there's two genders. You see?
Yeah, and I think you're fine. You're going to consider that. You say that you're fine with there being more than one gender, as in if I want to identify something else, it's fine. You just don't want to have to call me. And I think
that's correct.
That's a fine point. But if I were to identify as another gender, wouldn't I think that your idea of two genders be a little offensive?
It might. I mean, it would be no more offensive than someone having a religious difference or political difference. See, my opinion is rooted first and foremost in biology.
Yeah, but people find their political differences to be offensive also.
No, that's okay, but I couldn't care less if people find my political differences offensive.
Okay.
Wearing this hat is considered to be offensive, despite the heroic work
I
they
would
do.
disagree simply because that hat represents a government agency, not necessarily what that government
Well,
agency is doing.
It also represents the members of that government agency and their mission statement.
We can worry about what's
So,
right.
but you shouldn't.
We're right.
You shouldn't
Or we
stop
can worry about
saying or
what's your
doing
issue?
something
What's your problem?
just
How
because
can I
you
be
think
of
it's going to
service?
offend
How can I
somebody.
help? How can I
I
love
gotta
you
get to class,
today?
but thank you very much for your
It's
time.
the best way
Hey,
to
you're
love
really
you.
thank you, man.
I like this. I liked how cordial this was. I picked a thing or two from Charlie. You know, as Charlie said, you have the right to identify as whoever or whatever you want, but you don't have the right to force someone to call you that, according to Charlie. And they agreed on one thing though. You know, as Charlie said, in Oregon, there's a third box in the gender column to represent non-binary. I mean, Charlie thinks it's morally reprehensible, and this trans activist actually thinks it is because of the age factor there. Children, according to Charlie, are confused nowadays because the world's already chaotic, and then you telling a child that you can be whatever you want, you can choose to identify as whatever you want, it's just going to end up confusing him more because, of course, there are a variety of options to choose from. I mean, I've heard of kids identifying as cats, dogs, you know. One can wake up and say he wants to be a pig the next day. Who cares? And in Oregon, Charlie said kids who are 15 years of age could change their sexual structure through state funds without the consent of their parents. I know in this part of the world here, you become an adult at 18. You literally have, let's say, your whole life ahead of you as an adult at 18. It starts at that age. So to give this kind of leverage to kids of 15 is kind of wrong, according to Charlie and the trans activist. He believes that at 15 they should have their parents' consent, which is a good thing though, because the fact is they're still kids. And giving them that sort of power, at some point, maybe a few of them would end up regretting it, because at that point, the adrenaline rush of youth, youthful exuberance is going to be a lot. And around that age, around that time, without direction and guidance, a lot of youths end up making the worst decisions that mar the rest of their lives. And now back to what started the talk in the first place, the difference between gender and sex. This reminded me of back when I was in elementary school and I was meant to fill out a form. And the part where in my little mind, it was meant to be gender written there. I saw sex and I asked my teacher, I was like, what's this for? She said, it's to prove or for you to identify whether you're male or female. And I was like, okay, I'm a girl. I'm female. And I ticked the F box. Now, this brings me to saying, just as Charlie said, gender and sex are directly related. Your gender is your sex. And your sex is your sexual identity, which is your gender. They are more or less one and the same. I mean, if you even check the dictionary, when you see sex, apart the first definition you're going to see is physical interaction between a man and woman. And the second definition you're going to see is the gender identity of an individual. So I believe they're more or less the same thing. And well, Charlie was able to explain one or two things to this trans kid that it's not merely based on social standards alone, that it's basically just two genders, male and female. I think you guys learned a lot from this video. I know I did. So please leave your comments in the comment section. Leave a thumbs up at the end of this video. And if you're just joining us on this channel, please remember to hit the subscribe button at the end of this. Thank you so much for watching and stay safe.